All right, ready to dive in. Today we're tackling the lion-tailed macaque. And wow, the research you sent over is amazing. It's all about this primate from, well, a very specific part of India, and we've got these excerpts from pasted text that look, well, pretty incredible.
Oh, it's a gold mine. A total gold mine. You'll see by the end of this monkey is, well, it's way more than just a pretty face.
More than just a pretty face, huh? Well, gotta start somewhere, so how about that name? Lion-tailed macaque. I mean, it's not like every day you hear a monkey being compared to a lion.
Right. It definitely grabs you. And you know, when you actually see a picture, the name, it kind of clicks. That silver mane, around the dark face and the black fur, even the tail with that tufted hair at the end. Like, it
Yeah.
really does remind you of a lion, doesn't it?
It's like a nature's version of those. If you squint, it kind of looks like things.
Exactly. But it's more than just a funny name. It shows how we as humans, we try to understand things. We connect new things to what we already know.
I see what you mean. So speaking of lions, I think big, right? Are these macaques huge too?
Well, not lion size, thankfully.
Oh, to
The
them.
males they're bigger, yeah. They can get over half a meter long. And that's not even counting the tail, which is, well, impressive. They can weigh up to 10 kilos, too. Females, they're a bit smaller, bit lighter.
Decent sized monkey then. The tails are almost as long as their bodies. That's crazy.
It is, and super important for how they live.
Yeah.
See, they live in the western Ghats of India. It's all dense, evergreen rainforest there. And these guys are completely arboreal, meaning they live their whole lives up in the trees. So those tails, they help them balance, move around in all those branches.
Hold on, so they're hardly ever on the ground. That's a pretty specialized way to live. But the Western Ghats, those are pretty important, right? I think I remember them being like a UNESCO site or something.
They are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. That means they've got incredible biodiversity.
Mhm.
And because these macaques are so adapted to the trees, anything that happens to that habitat is a direct threat to them. Got it.
Yeah.
So are a lion look-alike living high up in these super important rainforests? So what else is interesting about them? Are they loners or are they like party animals?
Oh, definitely not loners. They live in troops, 10 to 20 individuals, and they have a really strict social hierarchy. Like you've got the dominant male, he leads the group. Then the females, they usually stay in the troop they were born into. And younger males, they leave eventually. It prevents inbreeding.
Ah, so it's like high school, but with like way more climbing and a lot less awkward dancing.
Uh-huh. Yeah, something like that. But seriously, you're right about the social side of things. This kind of social structure where the males leave so they don't inbreed, it's common in a lot of primate species. It says a lot about how smart they are, balancing their own needs with the needs of the whole group.
Like they're playing the long game,
Yeah.
keeping the troop healthy and making sure their genes spread out, huh? So what are these guys eating to fuel all these rainforest adventures?
Well, they're omnivores, meaning they eat a lot of different things. Fruits, seeds, leaves, flowers, even insects. Wow, sounds like they're really taking advantage of that rainforest buffet.
They are. But here's the thing. They eat a variety of foods, sure, but they're actually really picky about certain types. They've got their favorites. And that's where things get, well, interesting, especially when we talk about their conservation status.
Wait, picky eating and conservation, what's the connection?
Think about it. If their favorite foods start disappearing, because the habitat changes, they can't just easily switch to something else. This being specialized, it makes them very vulnerable.
So it's like being a foodie but getting stuck with a really limited menu. Not good. And you said this is tied to their conservation status.
Sadly, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The lion-tailed macaque is listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List.
Endangered. Seriously. I mean, we're not talking about some random bug here. This is a primate, clearly intelligent, with like this whole complex social structure. That's kind of scary.
It is, and it shows that even species that can adapt, they can be in serious trouble if their environment changes too fast.
So, last time, things weren't looking too good. The lion-tailed macaque. Endangered, right? And they're already dealing with, like, their habitat shrinking in the Western Ghats. So what are we doing to, actually help them?
Well, some good news, some work to be done, let's say. The good news, there are protected areas in the Ghats, specifically to conserve the macaque and where they live.
Like, national parks, reserves, that sort of thing. Are there any that are, like, particularly successful?
Silent Valley National Park in Kerala. It's amazing, a real pristine rainforest, and a good number of these macaques live there.
Silent Valley.
Oh.
It even sounds peaceful.
Oh, it is. Totally undisturbed stretches of that tropical evergreen forest, the kind of environment these macaques, well, evolved in. And you know what? It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, too.
So like double the protection.
Yeah.
Being a World Heritage Site probably helps with, funding and getting attention too, right?
For sure. And Silent Valley is so important because it's got those big connected areas of forest that the macaques need. Remember, fragmentation is a huge problem. Isolates populations, makes them more vulnerable.
Yeah, like trying to live in a city where every block is separated by a giant wall. Not exactly great for like meeting other macaques or finding a mate. But these protected areas, they're kind of like islands, right? Surrounded by, well, all that human activity. What about the areas outside those zones?
That's where community-based conservation comes in. It's, well, the idea that you can't just, do conservation in a bubble. You have to include the people living near these macaques, the people whose lives are connected to the forest.
This is about humans and macaques living together, not just keeping them separate.
Exactly. And there's some really cool ways to do that. Like some programs are working with farmers to, well, to promote something called agroforestry.
Agroforestry sounds a bit like science fiction or something. What is that in simple terms?
It's like having trees as part of farming. Instead of clearing everything for crops, you plant trees alongside them. It's good for everyone, really. The farmers get benefits like better soil, less erosion, and the macaques, they get a better habitat,
Yeah.
closer to what they naturally have.
So it's not just about like setting land aside. It's about making the land we use better for wildlife. Pretty smart. But what happens when the macaques do go into villages or farms? That's got to cause problems, right?
It does. And sadly, sometimes macaques get hurt or even killed because of it. But some programs, they're focused on reducing those conflicts. Like one way is to give the macaques other food options, planting fruit trees close to the forest.
So kind of like a, hey, eat here, not in our fields buffet for the monkeys.
Yeah, pretty much. And there are programs that teach people about the macaques, like how they behave, why they might be coming close to humans. Less fear, when there's more understanding.
Makes sense. Less like a monster movie, more like your fascinating neighbor, right? But changing how people farm, dealing with conflict, that sounds like a huge job.
It is. And it has to happen along with dealing with the root causes, and those are complicated. Poverty, not using land sustainably, all those economic things that make people, well, use the forest in ways they shouldn't.
Like a tangled knot, right? You can't just pull one string and expect everything to like magically untangle.
Exactly. And another part of that knot is, well, research. The more we know about lion-tailed macaques, the better we can protect them.
Research. So what kind of stuff are scientists looking at that could help?
Oh, lots of things. Their behavior, their ecology, how human actions affect them, even their genes.
Genes. So like their DNA, how does that help with conservation?
Well, by looking at their DNA, we can see how much genetic diversity there is within different populations of macaques and between them. Low diversity, that could be a sign of inbreeding, and that makes a species more likely to get diseases, less able to adapt to change.
So like checking the macaque's family tree for any bad patterns.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And that info is really important when you're deciding things like where to create wildlife corridors to connect groups that are separated, or even whether to move some macaques around to mix things up, genetically speaking.
Like a genetic matchmaker.
Something like that. But the goal is serious. Make those macaque populations stronger, more resilient in the long run.
And speaking of resilience, there's another cool research area, the gut microbiome.
Okay, lost me with the science words there. Gut microbiome, what is that?
It's the community of tiny organisms living in their digestive system. Bacteria, fungi, all those little things we think of as germs, but they're actually super important for their health.
Their internal ecosystem, kind of.
Yeah.
And how does that help with conservation?
Turns out these gut microbes, they play a huge role in how well the macaques digest their food, how strong their immune system is, even in how they behave. We're finding that what they eat, it directly affects what their gut microbiome looks like. So their picky eating, which we thought was a bad thing, might actually be like a clue to how they survive.
Maybe.
Yeah.
If we can understand how different diets affect their gut health, then we might be able to, develop things to help them, both in captivity and in the wild, like probiotics, but for macaques.
Wow, so we're not just protecting the forest, we're trying to understand the tiny worlds inside them too. Like we need to be conservationists on like multiple levels.
I like that. And to really see those multiple levels, there's this field called landscape ecology, and it's playing a big part.
Landscape ecology. Okay, another science term. Explain, please.
It's about looking at how all the different parts of the landscape, like forests, rivers, roads, even where people live, they all interact. and it affects where different species are found and how well they're doing.
So it's like zooming out, seeing the whole picture, not just the individual pieces.
Right. For the lion-tailed macaque, it means figuring out how things like roads going through their territory or plantations replacing natural forest, how those things affect their ability to move around, find food, have babies.
Like, we need to become urban planners, but for monkeys,
Yeah.
making sure their city has everything they need. But with all this happening, protected areas, those community programs, high-tech research, are we actually making a difference for these macaques? Last time we were talking about that landscape ecology thing, right, and how it's helping us see the bigger picture for the lion-tailed macaque. It's pretty wild how much goes into protecting a species. Like, it's not just, putting a fence around some trees, it's understanding their whole world.
It really is. And all that work, all the boots on the ground stuff and all that super advanced research, well, it's starting to show that maybe there's some hope for them.
I'm ready for some good news. What are we learning that's, like, actually promising?
Well, we talked about genetics, remember? That field it's changing so fast, and it's giving us some really powerful tools. Like, you remember how we talked about the macaques being picky eaters, how that could be a problem?
Yeah, like if their favorite foods disappear, they can't just, like, eat whatever's around.
Right. But what if, and this is where it gets cool, what if we could figure out the exact genes that make them choose those foods? That could change everything.
Wait, so we could actually know which genes make them want, like certain fruits or leaves. How would that even help?
Okay, picture this. If we know why they eat what they eat at the genetic level, we could, like, guess how they'll react to changes in the forest. Maybe new plants show up because the climate is changing, that kind of thing. Or we could even maybe try to get them to eat more different kinds of food so they're not so dependent on just a few things.
Whoa, that's kind of blowing my mind. It's like we're going from let's protect what they eat to let's figure out their cravings and maybe help them adapt. That's like next level stuff.
It's really cool. And it's still new, but it could be huge. And there's another area of research that I personally find really interesting, studying the sounds they make, their vocalizations.
You mean like all those calls and noises? I've heard recordings, they're pretty chatty. What can we learn from that?
For a long time, we knew they had these complicated calls, but we didn't really get the details, the nuances. But now, with, better recording tech and AI and all that, we're starting to understand what they're saying.
So we're cracking the monkey code.
Yeah, exactly. And it's telling us so much about, like, their social lives, how they warn each other about danger, even how they see the world around them. Like, we're finding out that they have specific calls, not just for, say, a leopard, but for how close the leopard is.
Yeah, so it's not just leopard, it's more like leopard right here, run, or leopard way over there, but kind of looking at us, so be careful.
Exactly. It's that level of detail. It's incredible. And it helps us understand how they get around in the forest, the choices they make based on what they're hearing, how messing with their communication could hurt them, all that.
So basically learning their language so we can protect them better.
Exactly. And this research is helping us build better ways to, like, keep an eye on them. Think of it like this. Sensors in the forest that can listen and tell us if they're making certain calls, maybe there are poachers around or their habitat is being messed with.
That's like having like a whole network of monkey spies working for conservation. That's pretty amazing. Okay, I'm feeling a lot more optimistic now. It seems like we're moving past just studying these macaques. We're learning how to like really listen to them to get what they need on a whole other level.
I like how you put that. It's about changing how we see them, from just something to study to these beings with their own lives, their own, well, complexity. That's super important if we're going to save them in the long run.
So it's bigger than just, saving one species. It's understanding them, where they fit in, respecting that, and maybe, just maybe, learning a bit about ourselves while we're at it.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, their story it's part of our story, right? What we choose to do, how we treat nature, those choices, well, they affect us all.
Really well said. I think we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We've learned all about the lion-tailed macaque, what makes them special, the problems they face, and all the amazing things people are doing to protect them. It's a story of like beauty and toughness, and I gotta say, I have a whole new respect for these amazing monkeys.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And I hope it's made you and everyone listening want to learn more, maybe even do something to help, and to think about, how we all impact the world around us.
You know what? This whole deep dive, it wasn't just about learning facts. It was about like connecting with something bigger, realizing that we're all part of this web